Good morning, Austin New Church. Hope you guys are doing well. If you are here in the room with us, we would love to invite you to stand up. If you're at home, I guess you can choose whether you want to stand or sit or recline. This is a new song to me, and Mark sent it to me earlier this week and said, we need to do this song. And I listened to the first two lines and I was in. It says, I'm pulling on joy from heaven's reserves. He stored up enough for every winter I'm served. And I love that idea that no matter what challenges we're going through as individuals, as a church, as a people, God has stored away enough joy to carry us through it.
I'm pulling on joy from heaven's reserve. Stored up enough for every winter I'll serve. I'm seeing beyond my circumstance. This joy that I have is my inheritance joy. This is the joy of the Lord.
The joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength. Oh, He is my hope. The joy of the Lord is my strength. There's gonna be glory. There will be glory after this. No need to worry this present suffering. There will be glory after this. There's gonna be glory.
There prepared a place I'll call my home. Never will see him face to face. He'll wipe every tear from my face. Joy, this is the joy of the Lord. Oh, I'm talking about joy. This is the joy of the Lord.
Ooh.
seat where I made room for you and me. Lord, never leave. Stay with me. Come on in, take a seat. I made room for you and me, and never leave. Oh, stay with me. Come on in now, come on in, take a seat. I made room for you and me, and never leave. Stay with me. Come on in, take a seat. I made room for you and me. Oh, never leave. Oh, stay with me. Stay with me. Stay with me. Stay with me. Oh, stay with me. Stay with me. Stay with me. Come on in now. Come on in and take a seat. I made room for you and me. Never leave. Stay with me. Come on in, take a seat. I made room for you and me. Never leave. Stay with me. Stay with me. Stay.
Let us stay.
Make my heart your home. All that's mine is yours. Make my heart your home. All my life is yours.
Woo! That's good. That's really good. Y'all be seated for. I hope y'all appreciate good music. That's really good. It makes Michael dance too, and he's got motions. Anyway, I loved it. Thank you guys. Welcome to Austin New Church. I'm Trey. I'm one of the pastors here. If you're visiting with us and you want to take out a phone and do that QR code thing and let us know you were here, you can just drop your email in there and you'll be added to our email list. You'll know all the goings-on about what's going on here every week, and it's the only way we communicate. We're not really good at Facebook, but we try. Next week, you should plan on being back next week. If you hadn't already, we're having our friend Stan Mitchell come in to speak with us, and to say Stan's just he's a friend, he's a mentor, and to say he's an LGBTQIA ally would be an understatement. The dude. He lives it. I mean, it's amazing, the stuff that he gets to do online. If you're familiar with his work, go listen to anything he ever does. We clear the band. I mean, we do a lot of things to make sure Stan's got enough width to do what he wants to do on a Sunday morning with us. So he was here Mother's Day, and we think in the fall, but we're not really sure. Anyway, be back next week. What else? Oh, I did hear that. I read this morning, and so just know this. I heard hospital administrations were down for COVID stuff, and so that area has moved into the stage 4. But we're still in stage 5, but that area is in stage 4. But they're seeing the downtrend. I would expect in the next couple of days we're going to be back below that threshold. So we will move to the protocols of, hey, if you're comfortable, you master your comfort level. So be ready for that next week or the following. March 6th, though, is when we invite the kids back. We're going to be having kids ministry stuff going on. Stephanie's ready. All our volunteers are ready. We're so excited. We're going to be doing it in this hour. So for now, we're only going to be doing it in the 11 o'clock hour, but it's the way we're going to launch that March 6th. And I think that's it. Stand up, turn around, find a third of a face you don't recognize, introduce yourself, bump elbows, and tell them you're glad they're here. I will. Hey, online folks. Hi. How are y'all? Hey, I just dropped the link to the virtual foyer into the comment section there on the Facebook page. Dana sent that to me, so I don't know if that means she's out today, but if she is, y'all go there and hang out with each other. Roy, you're in charge, okay? I think. Anyway, but you don't have to be in charge. I know it's a great place. I enjoyed dropping in there a couple of minutes ago on my drive over to First Sunday Lunch. I tried last week, but I was too late. But anyway, love seeing you guys all the time. I love your comments. Drop in the comment line where you're viewing from, and maybe it connects with somebody else that's joining us for the first time. Anyway, love you guys. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Join me in your spots if you can. You got me on? I know better than to invite you guys to slide up and take up these front spaces. You just aren't going to do it. Church folk are funny. Church folk like to pretend like they're led by the Spirit, but the reality is if you move them out of their chair, they'll fold your church in on you. So I know better than to ask you to move, but it sure would be nice, but watch everybody not do it. So I can't see you anyhow. Can't see that far. So good morning, one and all. My name is Jason. It's good to be back. Definitely focus on March the 6th and give that some thought. We will never pull the lever of guilt and shame to make people come to church because I think that's just, we're done with that, right? But there's something about reopening. It will be good to see your faces and see those of you who have been sitting this out. And so we're hoping for great things March the 6th. I have to tell you, there's great things coming to this as a church in the near future. We'll give you more details later, but this is a season where we're going to begin to really work on some of the things God has given us as a gift to the city. We're going to develop this whole space in a different sort of way, and it's going to be fun. You want to be in at ground level on that. Just trust me on that. So more to come, more details to follow. So today we get to wrap up a 6-week series, and then Stan will bat for me next week. And it's a series about our vision and our values, and so it's really an introduction. It's a summary of who we are as a faith community. And it really is the kind of stuff that you should go back. If you have questions about who we are and you're just tuning this in, go back. All of that stuff is always stacked up on the cloud somewhere, out online somewhere. It lives forever. So we started this whole series the first week of January, talking about our interfaith ecumenical posture. That's really the way we see ourselves as one of many things. That one thing doesn't get to exclude everything else. And so that was how we started the year, talking about that. Then we talked about social justice and the gospel, and I made the case as strongly as I can make it that you can't have one without the other. There's no such thing as a gospel that sets the heads free and gets belief straightened out, that doesn't change the way people live in the world. It just is an unacceptable mid-20th century American spin, and it's not the gospel. And so we talked about that. Then we talked about what I think are some compelling reasons to continue to focus on gathering in corporate worship. Maybe they were compelling, maybe they weren't. We'll see, March the 6th, I suppose. And then we looked at how we see the Bible functioning in our faith community. And that, above all of the other things, perhaps is what gives us most permission to say, let's deal with the voices in our head, and let's focus on how to be a gospel-centered community, and let's hold our text appropriately. And then we looked at, last week, we talked about health and holistic living. And so today we get to wrap up our discussion talking about empowered people, or an empowered church, or an empowered faith community. Now, if you're keeping really good score and you've been here for a really long time, you might notice there's one piece of our vision that I'm not going to talk about this time around. It's the one we used to call our vision of being a multiplying church. For many years, it was part of our vision, and in fact, in the very beginning, we existed in 3 different campuses. We would run around and shuttle all over town. We would draw straws and figure out who was going to cover what. And for a while, that's how we did things. We thought of ourselves as a church plant that was willing to plant churches. Well, that hasn't been part of our conversation for a while. We're in a different season. If that comes back online, certainly we are not going to be generous with what God gives us to do, calls us to do. We're involved in planting Amor Original, which is Caesar's Spanish-speaking congregation, but that's entirely virtual. So it just isn't front of mind at the moment. It's deep in our DNA, and we will pull it forward as needed. So today, we turn our attention to an empowered church, one where every partner is encouraged to identify and fulfill the unique calling on their life. Now, today's going to be a very practical conversation, and I hope that it encourages you. If it doesn't, don't tell me it didn't. If it does, be sure and let me know. Here's how we see our value. Here's how it's written online. If you wanted to find it in writing, here's what it reads. We see a church that values each individual's personal gifts and abilities. We believe every single person, no exceptions, can and should discover and use their gifts to God's glory in serving others. We summarize that by simply saying, this is how we believe people are empowered. Let me cut right to it right now. Let me just get it as tight as I can get it. My job as your pastor is not to call you to build my vision. It's to help you navigate whatever obstacles you face so that you can mobilize to build the vision that God has planted in your heart and your mind. And I hope that you see how all of the polarity is switched right there from maybe the kind of faith communities that you grew up in. My vision is for you to mobilize to do the thing God has given you to do. You are my vision. You doing you. That's the bottom line. I can't cut it any closer to the bone than that. Now, I know and love and have worked for pastors who think about that very differently. They see their calling is to use people to inspire and deploy them, to encourage them to get busy building what's on their hearts as the leader. That's what they see as the vision of their life. But think about that for a moment. Let's be honest about that. Besides being oddly leader-centric and more than slightly patronizing, that practically assumes that you can't discern the purpose for your life without your pastor. Who wants to be that pastor? Are you kidding me? When did we give up such power and authority to people that stand at the center of spiritual communities? I'm not sure when we did, but it feels super cringy to me now. I don't see my role as that. It's not about casting a vision so you come and be part of what I see. How can I best leverage your gifts to build what God has put on my heart to do? That's just not how I think about it anymore. If that's how I thought about it, if it was my job to determine a vision for your life, then it would also be up to me to keep you moving in that direction. I'd have to billow air into your lungs the moment you start to get weary or the moment you start to sort of lack energy. That would be something that would be up to me. And so it becomes a question of energy around calling, and that matters. And here's why. You actually already have enough built-in energy. In fact, it's inexhaustible if you tinker with it. You've got enough energy to keep you up late at night and get you up the first thing in the morning to do exactly what God put you here to do, what you were born to do. You don't have that kind of energy for what God put in my heart to do. Does that make sense? We're talking about where's the energy going to come from? You've got inexhaustible energy to stay mobilized after the thing that God has put on your heart. And that's a very, very, very important thing to consider. My vision is truly just to see you, release you, and support you as you mobilize to do that thing that is already on your heart. The question is, what is it? That's the question. I hope you see how that changes everything. It's about me empowering you to do you, and that's the fundamental piece of my pastoral philosophy. Now, I have a lot of reasons to be proud of this little church. We're far from perfect. We have a long way to go, I get it. But there are so many things that we do well. And significant among those things that we do well in my mind today is our ministry philosophy. It really is. We've intentionally built a culture that empowers you rather than consumes you. And here's how you know. You come to me with a big idea, and I say, let's do it. You build it. Every time. Hey, Pastor, I'm waiting for somebody to say this. Hey, Pastor, we need a prison ministry. You bet we do. Go for it. How can I support you? We do. Pastor, we need to do this. We need to do that. Yes, that's how you know that this is about empowering you to mobilize. The question for you is, what is that thing for you? It's the most important question I think you'll ever be asked around the conversation related to the local church. Not about who's in, who's out, who's going to hell, who's right, who's wrong. Forget all of that. Here's the question. What are you born to do? What are you brilliant at? What are you gifted at? What comes most natural to you? What do you love to do? What would you hate to stop doing? You get my point. How would you describe the lane in which you run the best? That's my question for you. It's the most important question you can ask yourself. Any conversation about empowering people to go and do the work of love in the world is going to begin with that question: what can you do? Now, we could locate today's discussion in the writings of Paul and in his extensive treatment about what he calls the spiritual gifts. We could do that. That seems like a decent place to start if you're talking about church people. His discussion, you understand, deals exclusively with the people assembled as members of those small local churches that he founded and maintained. And framing a conversation about what we're empowered or what we're gifted to do in that way might leave the impression that these principles only work in church, which is something, let me be very clear, that I do not believe. Or I suppose we could tap into Paul's language around the human body with its variety of functioning parts to talk about how we each have a role to play. Also, not a bad approach. We could do it that way too, but also focused entirely on the local church and church people. I want to take a different angle. You'll get familiar with me over time that I always want to blow the conversation beyond the walls of the church. I'd rather think about our giftedness, because that, of course, is the question of the day, and our unique brilliance as individual human beings in the context of human need and human longing. That's where I want to situate it, rooted in an internal sequence of actions and responses that should be familiar to you from a story from the public ministry of Jesus. Here would be my concern if we locate this in Paul's treatment of the subject of gifting. Ancient men had simplistic understandings of the human psyche. And we need to engage a deeper set of things than just simply duty and honor and shame and obligation. You see, that's how ancient men thought of things like this. What were you required to do? What must you do? What must you not do? I want to locate it differently because I want to dial in the conversation about what are you delighted to do? Because that's where the energy is. I wonder if you agree with me this morning. How would I know if you did? There you go. Tara's awake this morning. I want to locate this in something much more profound than what must you, what do you have to do, let's talk about delight, because that's where the passion flows. That's where direction and purpose begins to emerge. We can't go back to those early ways of thinking because we've learned so many things about ourselves since the days of Paul. Things that like, what makes us tick? Where are we creatively engaged and why? And can we put our finger on why this thing moves us and this thing absolutely doesn't, right? What fulfills us? What connects us to making a difference in the world? And I'm sure you'll agree, very little of this is exclusive to participants of faith communities. Listen, if you're talking truth, it's going to be true for all people in all contexts. That's why I don't know that we can have conversations anymore about this is what church people ought to do. We are people. We are people in a world, and so we're going to back it out to a higher level. The fact is, I think we know more about ourselves than we did in the first century. And we've yet to plumb the depths of human understanding and human functioning. I get it. There's more to learn. But we don't want to go back and roll back the time when it was simply a conversation of duty. Most religions, most great world religions were born in a context that was simply about duty and shame and blame and all of those things. They must grow and they must evolve. And so that's kind of what I'm after this morning. I believe each one of us longs to know that we fit somewhere uniquely. It's coded into our operating system. It's part of the DNA. We were born to process and experience the delight of discovering and operating within our deep God-given purpose. Think real quickly about times in your life when you knew you were in it and times when you weren't. How differently did that feel to you? One is full of permission and one is full of angst, and you can feel it in your body. Empowered churches, empowered ministries understand this, right? And so we try to create those kinds of spaces. So if we're not going to talk about this in the context of Paul, what will frame this conversation for us? Well, there's an instructive little exchange between Jesus and his disciples that I love so much. It isn't an airtight doctrine of giftedness. This isn't a comprehensive list of the ways that God has gifted people to impact the world, but it brings to life a little process, a stripped-down little sequence of movements that show how Jesus often motivates people to move on behalf of actual need. Before we turn there, a couple of ideas that I think are foundational when we're having a conversation about how we're gifted, what we're brilliant at, what God has called us to do. Number one, every one of us has a contribution to make. You might be raised in the Midwest and you might be so terminally nice that you're not accustomed to talking about yourself as having gifts, right? You try not to notice that anybody from the Midwest, something about the weather just makes us unwilling to say, I'm absolutely brilliant at this thing. Well, that seems, listen, I think the rule in the Midwest is whatever you do, don't stand out, don't be noticed. I never fit in the Midwest. You can imagine why. But all of us have a contribution to make, a unique brilliance. It's possible that you might need some help discovering that, and I think that's where the local church can come in handy. But your heart, your body already knows that there's something you were born to do here. It's really about finding the courage to name it. I think In fact, that really is the difference. It's not that you don't know, it's that maybe you don't have the courage to say, this is the play that I will score from every time, coach, give me the ball right here. You guys know the story about Dave Beckham's shot, right? Bend it like Beckham. There was a shot about midfield, am I right, Billy? That if Dave Beckham ever got a penalty, a free kick, he could hook that ball so hard that he would send the goalie this way, and then it was too late to send the goalie that way, and he could do it every time if you could just give him that spot on the field. You have that play. You have that kind of talent and that kind of brilliance. I believe you do. Second thought, that gift, that talent, that ability, that brilliance, it wasn't invested in you solely for you to enjoy. It was invested in you to give something to the greater world, the onlooking world. Don't get me wrong, it's wonderful to watch you run in your lane. It's a thing of beauty to observe, it really is. But ultimately, what really integrates a life, what pulses with purpose, is when your running in your lane connects meaningfully to the common good. Of course, you were gifted for your own pleasure and your own satisfaction and that of God, but it's also something to see the closed loop when that thing you were born to do actually alleviates someone's suffering in the world. Third thought about this before we look at the text. This means that you're going to thrive in certain places and flourish in certain places, and other places you're going to wilt and you're going to wither. And it will have nothing to do with your character or how hard you try. It has to do with where you're gifted to produce fruit and flower, if that makes sense. It has nothing to do with your spirituality or your commitment to God. It has nothing to do with those things. It has to do with the space, the place that you're planted. And here's how you know your brilliance. Whenever you say things like, hey, man, I thought everybody could just do that. Doesn't everybody just see the world this way? That's when you're getting really, really close to your unique contribution. I have conversations with my children, the two who are in Chicago right now. And one of my kids is in a very rigorous program, pre-law program at Loyola University. And she sends me these texts that she's just so excited about writing this new paper. I'm like, baby, you know that's not normal, right? It is not normal to want to do that with your life. What does that tell us? There's something in her mind that comes alive in that space. Now you're getting close to that place of integration. Another thought, virtually limitless energy, and this is what really interests me. Virtually limitless energy and inspiration is the natural result of you operating in your lane. Now, it may tire your body some, but you come alive. You feel a surplus of energy. Teachers in the room, it's not the salary, is it? It's the light bulbs going off behind people's heads, isn't it? It's the moment of integration that drives you. Your brilliance is going to produce a kind of energy that you can't explain, but it keeps you moving forward. I think that's true for all of us. You have the permission to be yourself. I don't know if your parents taught you this growing up, but you have the permission to find that thing and commit your life to that over time. And the cool thing about this permission is it comes in a pack of two. It comes with permission for those around you not to have to be you. Right? Not everyone is going to function the way you function. Not everyone comes alive in the same spaces. So when you find the permission to say, God has gifted me to do this thing, that also has permission for those around you to do something different. Now we're starting to see the beginnings of team. And finally, it means you're going to have to discover some language to help us understand what that thing is for you. You're going to have to find a way to say, listen, give me the ball here, coach, or let me do this thing, or I was born to do this, or when everyone else begins to wilt, maybe that's when you become alive. I have friends who the higher demand or the higher the pressure or the more intensity involved in the situation, it's as if their heart rate lowers to even a lower speed. The more chaos, the more crisis, the more they come alive. That's not normal. But boy, am I glad that they're going to do that thing for the team when that thing comes, when the need is to do that comes to the fore, when teams are learning to function and grow. Okay, so those are some thoughts on giftedness in general. Let's turn our attention to Mark chapter 6 right now. This is a little story. You're gonna know that whenever I want to have a conversation, I always want to go back to the things that Jesus actually taught and said. So Mark chapter 6, you'll know this as the feeding of the 5,000. It reads this way, verse 30. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him that they had done what they had done and taught. Now I think what had happened is he had sent them out to do some ministry and they were circling back. And he says to them in verse 31, come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while. For many were coming and going and they had no leisure time to eat. Anybody ever been in a situation like this where you're just going so fast, you're starting to run thin? And they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now when they saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. So just imagine a small lake, medium-sized lake. Jesus and the hotshot crowd gets in the boat and heads across, and the people figure it out, and so they run on foot to get there before he did. And he saw the great crowd, Jesus did, and he had compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place," of course it was, "and the hour is now very late." I love when they bring all of the obvious things forward, right? "Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy something for themselves to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, sheepishly, I'm imagining, Are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them that to eat?" Obviously, they didn't have the resources for that. And he said to them, "How many loaves have you? Go and see." When they had found out, I think they stole it from a little boy. That's how Matthew tells the story. They said, "We have 5 and 2 fish." Then he ordered them to get all the people to sit down in groups on the green grass. And so they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves. And he gave them to his disciples and set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. Those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 men. Now, I love this story for so many reasons. It's a classic. Very few stories are told by all 4 gospel writers. This is one of only a handful. And what aren't interesting to me are the details that they differ on, right? So some are going to say this many, some are going to say that many, some are going to get a couple of things different. That's not that interesting to me. Also not super interesting to me is the fact that he only counts the men. Of course he did. That would have been typical at the time. Disappointing, but very much first century. What is interesting to me is this exchange, what this exchange reveals about Jesus and leadership. You see, these disciples were having to learn to lead by watching Jesus. What it says about human hunger and need and fear and resources and what do we do next and all of those things. That's what's intriguing to me. You see, it freezes a process in time, a frame by frame, a little bit of a shutter by shutter sequence of events that we can learn from. It brings to life the process by which something ordinary is blessed and becomes something extraordinary for the good of the masses. So a few thoughts on this passage. The whole exchange begins with Jesus noticing the need of the crowd. Jesus intended to rest and recover. God knows he needed it until he saw the crowds with compassion, which sets the context for another type of seeing. The next people to learn to see are going to be the disciples right after Jesus. See, the disciples notice that there's going to be a mob if they don't get these people fed. Somebody looked at their clock and said, "The food truck's just closed down. What are we going to do now?" Nothing worse than a hangry mob. They saw the problem, the lack of food, not the potential. But how could they have? You see, they were newcomers to this new world where all bread is God's bread. They were just beginning to glimpse what Jesus could do in the presence of human need like that. So even though their original proposal comes in super, super weak, send them away, let them be responsible for themselves, they still notice the hunger, and that matters. There will always be a deep and beautiful connection between the needs of people around us and our life's purpose. Just know that when you find one, you're getting close to the other. What do people actually need? What do you have on hand? That's the 1-2 punch that really begins to see the kingdom move forward. You see, we're not ready to see the heart of God until the needs of others cast long shadows on our imaginations. Oh, I hope you understand that those two things go together. I don't know a ton about theology, but this I do know. Wherever God and hungry people find themselves in the same space, stuff is about to start to happen. Stuff is going to begin to happen. Thirst is quenched. Hunger is satisfied because people are mobilized. There isn't, hear me church, there isn't a scalpel sharp enough to cut between God and the needs of people. When you find one, you already found the other, and that's Theology 101. You see, the resources the disciples were able to come up with were way too few. This is also true about how love works in the world. How shocking it must have been asked, well, what do you have on hand? Obviously, Jesus, we're telling you that these people are starving for a reason. If we had something on hand, we would have leveraged it. What a silly question when Jesus says, well, what do you have? But everything is beginning to connect now if you can watch it. And we know that John writes, when he writes about this same miracle, John says, Jesus literally asks them, what do you have, to test them. This question, think about it, what do you guys have handy, moves the focus of the story from the need to the available resources, and that's key. Because Jesus is always up to more than one thing at once. You see, the hungry people were going to get some bread, and the people who are watching closely enough are going to be developed as leaders to begin to see the world the way Jesus did. He's alleviating suffering, but he's also schooling his followers at the same time. And as you grow more accustomed to the ways of heaven, you'll begin to recognize that love nearly always mobilizes too few resources to meet too great a need. That's just the way it goes. I could give you endless examples. We don't have time. Just remember, explosive, exponential multiplication is baked into the dough when heaven gets involved. Once we offer a little of what we have, Jesus usually breaks it down, and this is the part where the pain begins, into its component parts. The gospel writers say Jesus lifted the loaves to heaven, he broke them, he blessed them, and then he gave them back to the disciples to distribute to those who were hungry. First, love gives us gifts, and then love asks for those gifts to be given back in return. I wonder if your heart knows the pain of this process. It may not sound like a big deal to you until you've been asked to give back that small thing you've learned to treasure that God gave you. It feels like loss before it feels like anything else. It's disruptive and it's alarming. Ask Father Abraham, if you don't believe me, what it's like to give back that thing that God gave you. He tears apart their bits of bread. It wasn't much, but it got worse because he breaks it into tiny pieces, and then he directs them to give it away. Some of us can identify with this process. This probably describes the season of life that I find myself in. And if you think about it, it's as if the little bit we had, it was already too little to meet the need of the crowd. If you think about it, it was too little. But it begins by understanding that bread and that fish was on loan from God to us. You see, we don't own these things. And now we're getting somewhere. Our talents and our gifts and our abilities, the brilliant contributions that we can make are all given to be given away. And it sounds like a little sad if you think about it, but to be honest, it's the way the gifts of God work. We were given this little detail, though, in this story that says not only did it meet the need, there were 12 baskets left over. Everyone ate that day. This isn't a story about Jesus taking from his friends what little they had. This is a story about Jesus getting every mouth fed through multiplication. No one was left out, not even the disciples. Now, after the fireside service at 9:30, that's what we call it because there's about 4 people in the room, Trey shot me this long text and he says, I wonder, did Jesus actually multiply the bread and fish? Or did the crowd notice that the only person who was willing to give what he had was a little boy? And so passing that around, people just began to add what they brought too. I don't know how the miracle actually worked. It could have been that way. It could have been the old stone soup. Anybody remember the stone soup story? The point is, the people were fed, and the point is, the disciples had to see that even though the need is great, there's something God has given us for this moment. Can we release it? Can we allow him to break it and multiply it as the people are fed? Now, I know these aren't the only observations to lift from this passage. I'm sure you've heard it preached many other ways. But I think that this can be our guide as we think about an empowered congregation of people living on mission in our little corner of the world. So back to that important question I mentioned. Who are you? What is in your hands? What are you gifted at? What comes natural to you? What is your brilliance? What is that thing you're longing to contribute? What do you live to do? What would you die to do? What are you so good at that everything crackles and sparkles when you do it? What's your lane? What's your play? What's your shot? Is it possible that you have been put here for something specific to do that thing? Oh, I think it is. I have certainly considered how ANC has been put here in order to partner with you in the doing of that thing God has called you to do. As a local church, it's our sacred charge to see you, to empower you, and then to release and support you as best we are able to deploy those gifts on behalf of the common good. These 2 final thoughts as we close. That thing that you love to do so much, that you're so good at, that is your calling. You see, there's this thinking out there that says spiritual callings, I was called when I was in the shower. I was in Jerusalem on a mountain, and I was called. Listen, it's not all that mumbo jumbo. I've spent a ton of time in the ministry space working with candidates for ministry and vocational discernment. Is this what God's called me to do? Is it not? It's as simple as this. If you're brilliant at it and it produces a surplus of energy, I'm just going to say that's what you're called to do. You're called to live in that level of delight. Build your life on that. And this other thought. If you don't know what it is yet, it's okay. You're right on time. Start asking people that you're in community with. What's that thing? When does it really come together? They will have great details for you if you live in transparent, vulnerable, genuine community. And that's it, my friends. That's the church that we see. This may be the most practical of all of the 6 different things, but I think it matters. If you come to the end of this conversation and you can't come up with some way that you see yourself woven into this, then you're just going to drift right through. I think the hope is that you see a way to get engaged and say, I can contribute this in this space. At the first service, I don't know, Britta, are you still back there? Britta visited for the first time last week in person. She's from Minneapolis. She heard the all call to get involved with sound. And Britta, is already serving as a volunteer in our church. She doesn't know any of your names. She just got here from the Twin Cities. That's what I'm talking about. What are you gifted to do? And how can you bring it to bear on the local community? I wonder, have you ever heard the church describe her vision that way? Does this resonate with you? Because I think deep down inside, you've been dreaming that there's a place that was made just for you, a tailored space that you fit into like a key into a keyhole, like everything is designed to go together. I think that's true for you. I know that's true for me. I wonder if you would join me on your feet and pray. Band, you can find your way up here. If this kind of thinking gets an elevated heart rate from you, if it gets your mind going, there's a reason for that. Local churches are as good as the people involved. That's the bottom line. The reason to get engaged is so that you can see what God can do through the things that you bring. We end every time in the Word with a time at the table, and so in the next couple of minutes, during the next couple of songs, I would encourage you to find the elements. They're at the bottom of the stained glass around the room, and it's a real simple, self-explanatory thing. I'm proud of so many things about who we are, but I think the open table is the thing that I would really die for. You know, you may not know this, but there are whole movements of Protestant churches that are what they call closed table. That means if you're not a member of that local church, they can't be certain there's not sin in your life, and so you're not allowed to take communion. Do you know this? I could take you to many of them around town. Who closes the table? Who closes the access to God in the world, to Jesus in the world? Who does that? So we don't do that here. So in the next couple of songs, approach that basket and take that back to your seat. It won't be magical. It will be as simple as cellophane and tasteless cracker and a bit of fake juice. But we've been told to do that when we gather because that's the thing that reminds us how near God is to us. And so as you prepare your heart for the table, pray with me these words that across all Christian traditions we pray them. Say them if you know them. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, the glory forever. Amen.
The empty fill, the wounded heal, the broken back together. The poor are blessed, the weary rest. We will dance forever. Blinded see, the chained are free, the doubtful now believer, the outcast known, the orphan home. You are my Redeemer. Behold, behold, behold what love can do. Behold, behold, love's making all things new. The lost return, the voiceless heard, the mourner now rejoicing. The mountains shake, world awake, creation all composing. The sad untrue, the earth renewed, the song has found its singer. The darkness light, the dead alive, you are my Redeemer. Behold, behold, behold what love can do. Behold, behold, love's making all things new. joy. We've been struck down, will not destroy. We've sown in tears, will reap in joy. My eyes are open. My eyes are open. My eyes are open. My eyes are open. Behold, behold, behold what love can do. Behold, behold, love's making all things new. Behold, behold, behold what love can do. Behold, behold, love's making all things new. Come to the river, come to the river, taste and see. Come to the river, come to the river.
Come to the water, all who are thirsty. Yeah. Come and drink. Come to the table, all who are hungry. Come and feast. Those who are weary, those who are needy, come receive. Come to the river, come to the river, taste and see. Say, come to the water, all who are thirsty. Come and drink. Come on to the table. You know if you're hungry, making peace. Oh, say those who are weary, those who are needy, come receive. Come to the river, come to the river, taste and see. Come to the river, come to the river. Come on and taste and see. Hello, oh my soul, it does for you that you alone know. My soul, it just thirsts for you, Lord, and you I will taste and see that you are good. I will taste and see that you are good. You're good to me. Oh, I proclaim that today. I'll taste,
See that you are good.
see you are
I will taste.
every circumstance.
See that you are good.
Really good.
I will taste. See that you are good to me. I will taste. See that you are good. I will
I know
see that you are good.
that you're good.
I will taste, see that you are good to me. Take me to your river. I wanna go. Oh, take me to your river. I wanna go. Oh Lord, please let me go. Take me to your river. I wanna go. Oh, take me to your river. I wanna go.
Oh, man. That's so good. Y'all, if you go to church and hear Leon Bridges, you went to church. He is Texas's favorite son. If you don't know the work of Leon Bridges, he's an African-American singer-songwriter out of Fort Worth. And he is the face of America. That is the sound of our future, in case you need to know. Pull him up on your Spotify. You'll be grateful. He's one of our favorites. Thanks for being willing to do Leon songs. So these words from our poet, Madeline, who's a student at St. Ed's and a brilliant writer. She's just so simple, and she catches the drift of this. And so as she engaged the text poetically, and I engaged it sermonically. Julie, is that a word? Sermonically? Dr. Julie? If she says it's word, it's word. Here's her thoughts as you go. This is your benediction. To the church who thinks that they don't get to follow their dreams, oh, sign me up, right? That's all of us. Okay, start again. To the church who thinks they don't get to follow their dreams, There is no special club, no invisible velvet rope. There is no group of people who get to do what they love and then everyone else. You may not quit your job tomorrow, but God gave you to this world as a gift to make your part of it more reflective of love and truth and beauty and peace. You don't have to change the world, although please do if you want to, but simply start to do that thing you've always wanted to do, but have somehow convinced yourself that you could not. Say hello to that neighbor. Write a few words of that story. Plant seeds in a garden and remember to water them. Let your light shine without covering it with self-doubt, without self-consciousness or self-sabotage. Let it warm all those gathered around you. Go in peace. We'll see you here next week with Stan Mitchell. All right.